Welcome to episode 36 of the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. Today we talk about finding happiness. We explore what happiness is really, why is it important, and how can you get more happy. We're using Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project as our way to challenge ourselves to get happier. Let's get started. Welcome to the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. I am Kim McLaughlin, your host. I am a licensed psychotherapist, inspirational speaker, coach, blogger, podcaster, and I help people when they're feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and overloaded, and it shows up in overeating, emotional eating, and over dieting. And today we're going to talk about something really interesting. And that is about happiness. I just started back reading the book, The Happiness Project, which is by Gretchen Rubin. It was actually published back in, it was 2009. So it's been around for, it's been 11 years. But I saw it sitting on my one of my tables, and I thought I really want to pick it back up because what I like about the Happiness Project is, one, it talks about happiness, and it has a lot of doables, but also the Happiness Project goes by months, and it has, each month is there's a cluster of concepts that are in it, and so each month you can practice the different concept in order to increase your happiness and satisfaction in your life. To me, it felt like a really organized way to start doing something different in my life. And I found it to be really interesting and helpful. And I thought it would be really cool for us to talk about today. Whether you've read the book or not, this is really going to be an interesting podcast where we're really going to hone in on the idea of happiness and what it means. So, like I often do on the show, when I talk about a concept, I'll go look it up in the dictionary just to see what the words mean in order to give us kind of a general reference that's the same for all of us. We have a similar idea. So I looked up happiness, and the first thing I found very interesting, which has happened with other words that I look up, is there was 1.2 billion people are also looking up what's the definition of happiness. I thought that was interesting because I looked up the definition of happiness in order to do this podcast. So I had a really definite idea about why I wanted to look up the word. But there are 1.2 billion other people looking up the word for a lot of other different reasons, which made me think that I think there's a lack of happiness and a wondering what it is. So the definition was, happiness is a state of being happy. Well, that sounds like a no-duh kind of thing. Happiness is the state of being happy. Well, then that made me think I had to look a little further and find out what is happiness or happy, right? If happiness is a state of being happy, then what is happy? And I looked that up, and the definition is feeling or showing pleasure or contentment. And I thought that was interesting because that's actually what I want. I want in my life is to feel or show more pleasure or contentment. I've actually thought in the past that happiness really was kind of an unattainable ideal. That was just this idea of being happy, to me, was that we're in this kind of blissed out state, this kind of smiling all the time moment, smiley face moment all of the time. But if we're looking at having more pleasure or more contentment, that actually feels like a great thing that I want to have more of. So I looked also the word up in happiness up in Wikipedia, and it said the term happiness is used in the context of mental or emotional states, including positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. Happiness in its broad sense is the label for a family of emotional states such as joy, amusement, satisfaction, gratification, euphoria, and triumph. So happiness is this full-on picture of a lot of different feeling states within it. And to me, that feels more attainable and something that I want to look for. I often talk about wanting to have more joy in my life and more contentment. And those are all wrapped up in the construct of happiness. Before we go much further into what happiness is and what it might mean for you and what you can do about it, I want us to really remember that this is also what we're talking about is related to food. And when I talk about food issues and overeating, and when we're really in the throes of feeling upset about the amount of food that we eat, the type of food that we eat, how much we weigh, or how our bodies are reacting to food, we, at those point in times when we're so into food, we're not feeling happy in the way that I think we want to feel happy. So there's this moment when we have the food and we eat it, there's that moment of feeling happy and content and satisfied. But then there's all of the struggle that go on afterwards about feeling upset with ourselves that we ate or overate or ate things that we thought we shouldn't eat. And then feeling upset with our bodies and thinking that the food we ate created this body then that we don't like. It kind of goes round and around and around. And we lose that sense of feeling happy because we're feeling actually really frustrated with ourselves and upset and overwhelmed and overloaded. I'm not making the direct correlation that what you eat makes you happy or unhappy, but what I'm saying is the more we increase our happiness, the more we're able to determine what foods fit for us, how do we want to be around food, and really releasing that negative idea that we've set ourselves up with around eating and overeating. So it gives us a lot more joy and feeling of satisfaction with ourselves. We talked before about the 6 components to feeding your soul, and the happiness plays a part in all of that. So remember, the 6 components are the physical, how your body is with food and exercise. The second component is emotions, which is where happiness can reign, which is all those emotional states, those feelings that we have, and happiness is one of them. The third area is your mental, the thoughts that you have, and happiness definitely can affect how you think about yourself and how you see life. The fourth area is lifestyle and how we go about our day in terms of work, in terms of social engagements, relationships. Happiness absolutely shows up in that when we're not feeling happy, we don't feel as fully engaged with other people, or we might be distancing ourselves from others because we're not feeling that sense of happiness. The fifth area is mindfulness, and how connected are we to that inner sense of joy and ourselves and that bigger, higher purpose, that more spiritual connection. And the sixth area is self-love. Happiness absolutely is connected to self-love. That when we're feeling self-love, we're feeling happy and joyful. When we're not feeling self-love, it's harder to feel happy. All of those areas go together in terms of happiness. So absolutely, happiness plays a part in how we feel about ourselves, and that is connected to food. I am not going to say, and I don't believe that the more happy you are, the less you're going to overeat or the less you're going to be concerned about food. But you're going to find a peace with yourself when you introduce the idea of happiness being something that you want more of. And actually, what we're going to do next is we're going to talk about a happiness scale. I found when I was looking around on the internet for different ideas around happiness and finding happiness, one was the subjective happiness scale. And it was a research by 2 people, one woman, Lumborski, and Lepper. And I'm sorry if I didn't say their names right, but I absolutely will put a link in the show notes to their research. But they have this happiness scale, and so here are the questions that they ask. And so the questions go: for each of the following statements and or questions, please circle the point on the scale that you feel is most appropriate in describing you. And every question is on a 1 to 7 scale. And I'll give you how the scalings go as we go along. But just consider what your answer to these questions would be. And it will then give you some idea about kind of your subjective happiness, because happiness really is a subjective state and it's very personal, and you get to decide how happy you are. First question is, in general, I consider myself on a scale of 1 to 7, not very to a very happy person. So 1 would be not very happy, all the way up to 7, which is a very happy person. And so put yourself in that mix of, do I feel myself more on the end of a happy person or a not very happy person? The second question is, compared to most of my peers, I consider myself on a 7 scale, less happy to more happy. So 1 would be less happy, 7 would be more happy. So how do you consider yourself compared to other people? The third question is, some people are generally very happy. They enjoy life regardless of what is going on, getting the most out of everything. To what extent does this characterize you on a 1 to 7 scale? 1 being not at all, to 7 meaning it describes me to a great deal. So it's, how happy do you see yourself? And put that on the 1 to 7 scale. The fourth question is, some people are generally not very happy. Oh, they are not depressed. They never seem to be as happy as they might be. To what extent does this describe you? 1 to 7, 1 meaning not at all, to 7 meaning a great deal. So how unhappy are you is really what they're asking. Once you look at these questions, you can start stating, and like I said, I'll put a link to this in the show notes so you actually can do this this scale yourself to really look at it on a personal basis. But where do you fall on all of these questions? I think this would be a great journal opportunity to journal what these questions, if you do, you consider yourself a happy person? Do compared to others, do you think you're happy? And what is that? And then what does that mean for you? And what's that all about? There was really a point in time where I thought happiness was way too kind of, I almost took it to be a negative because it seemed to be something that wasn't really attainable and not something I would look for. Now I think it is something that's much more, that is attainable and is something that's valuable. To be happy would be wonderful or is wonderful. But I love the idea of putting it on a 1 to 10 or 1 to 7 scale to consider, how happy am I? And when I looked at that, I would consider myself very happy person, like at a 6 or a 7, because I feel happy and grateful, especially at this moment in time. You know, you could ask me a week from now, 2 weeks from now, how I fall on this subjective happiness scale, and I might not be as happy as I am at this moment. But that, I think, is because there's a day-to-day fluctuation in terms of where might I feel happy and how might I not feel happy. Often it depends on what's going on externally to me, what's going on out there in the world, and also what I think about everything that's going on around me. So it can be something that actually really happened or something kind of that I've made up in my head. I think that is where a lot of people lose their happiness, is the thoughts that we have that can say things are much more negative than possibly somebody else might see it. So compared to another person, I might see the same situation much more negative and be unhappy about it than they are. Or it could be I see certain situations and I'm much more happy and content with it than others are. And I can wonder, if I'm not happy about something, how might I be more happy? Which is exactly what Gretchen Rubin talks about in her book, The Happiness Project. It's actually called The Happiness Project, or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun. It was really ended up being a project for her. And I want to introduce that idea that it could be a project, which to me means it's a doable. When Gretchen talked about why she created the Happiness Project, it wasn't because she was horribly upset or down or, in the dumps and things were really bad. It was actually a way of going, I wonder, this is where I am right now, but I wonder if I could feel a little bit better. And I like that idea because that's actually how I go about my life. This is where I am right now. How can I be a little better? How can I do a little better? What can I understand a little better? And then I'll feel better. And she puts it in the context of happiness. And remember, we said in the beginning, happiness in its broad sense is a label for a family of pleasant emotional states, such as joy, amusement, satisfaction, gratification, that's hard to say, euphoria, and triumph. So it's all of those feelings that we're looking for, possibly within the idea of happiness. So when Gretchen took on the idea of creating the Happiness Project, each month was related to a topic. And we're in the month of January that we're taping this, and I thought it'd be really fun to look at what she talked about for the month of January. If you like this, please let me know and write a review and let me know that you like this, because I'd love to do more of these podcasts on these finding happiness themes. We can do this each month if you all like this, and we can go over some other of her ideas that she has each month for the 12 months of the year, because they're a great way to get more involved in creating more happiness within your life and within yourself. Hi, everyone. This is Kim, and my book is out. Feed Your Soul, Nourish Your Life, a 6-step system to peace with food is live. I recommend you get it. It has all my 6 components of feeding your soul, as well as my own story. Pick it up now. You can find it on my website at feedyoursoulunlimited.com. Thanks. The month of January, interestingly enough, she had the category about boost energy. And I think that goes along with what we've been talking about in these previous podcasts about how to start the new year, how to engage in looking at the new year in a fresh way, how to avoid any resolutions, and how to get into being more satisfied in looking back on what happened and then having that drive us into where we're going into the future. So January's boost energy comes at a time also when not only are we ending the holidays, starting a new year, but this is a time of there being more dark in the world in terms of the light, light and dark during the day and night, and also more cold. And boosting energy, I think, is a great concept to take into January as we begin the new year. She goes over 4 concepts in January that you can start doing, and they really are great doables, which is why we're talking about them. The first one, in order to boost energy, she talks about go to sleep earlier. And she talked about there being a lot of research, which I know that to be true. I've talked about this a lot, is to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That is what we all, for the general part, need. And really, most of us are sleep deprived. We don't get enough sleep. We're either not in bed long enough, we're not asleep long enough, we wake, we toss, we turn, and we don't get the proper amount of rest to get that good sleep. And the more we have proper rest and proper sleep, the more we're going to have more energy for the day. That's just how it goes. Also, the better we sleep, the less we're going to be obsessive or involved in using food as a way to keep our energy up and to keep us awake. That's what we sometimes will do with food, is if we don't sleep well, we will use food as a way to kind of get more energy going, like with sugar and with caffeine, can kind of do those quick energy boosts to take over for when we haven't gotten enough sleep. Some of the areas I like about sleep, and in addition to go to sleep earlier, is turn off your electronics. There is something that happens to our brain when we have all the lights on in front of us and we've kind of stimulated our brain with electronics. Got to start turning off our electronics earlier. I think an hour to 2 hours in advance is really important to keep, to not boost our brain to start working as we go to bed. The next one that I really like, and Gretchen talked about this in the Happiness Project a lot, is make the room dark. And I have found that since I have made it my business every night to have a dark room, I sleep so much better. I used to try to cover up the windows and the shades and everything. What I actually do, and that's what Gretchen talked about, is covering everything in the room. I use one of those eye masks that cover your eyes. I've been using them now for quite a few years. Oh my gosh, I can't sleep if I don't have it. I love it. It makes the room dark. I buy ones that are really comfortable, but those eye masks that you can wear to bed, I mean, it doesn't look really attractive, but it so helps me sleep because there's no light getting into my eyes or into my brain as I sleep, because you need to have a dark room to sleep. The last thing that Gretchen talks about, which I also know to be true, is you need a cold room to sleep. I don't know what the temperature is. You could look that up or just see. We generally keep our house cold during the wintertime. We just don't have the heat on very much. And we'll have blankets that we kind of peel off during the night. But having a cold room helps you to sleep. Having a warm room makes you toss and turn. I know this to be true. A long time ago when I was younger, I wouldn't, in the summertime, I wouldn't put the air conditioning on when I slept. And I tossed and turned all night long because it was just too hot. You got to have a cool room in order to sleep. So those are some good areas, some good doables to help you go to sleep earlier and to keep asleep and sleep better. The next thing Gretchen Rubin talks about in order to boost energy is she calls it exercise better. And what she talks about is to be more efficient in your exercise. I'm not really the girl that talks about exercising better. I think of it as engaging in some kind of movement, because movement helps increase energy. The more we're in movement, the more we're increasing our energy. What happens when we have issues with food and weight and overeating and emotional eating is we generally don't like to exercise. So that's why I don't like to call it exercise. I like to call it movement and doing some kind of physical movement. Some of the ways I have been able to get more movement into my life is I schedule movement in my calendar. It is physically in my calendar. I go to a gym. I've talked about that before, and I put the times of my movement in my calendar so that it is just a part of my day. I've recently changed over my schedule, my work schedule, and I changed over my movement schedule. So it went to different days now, and it actually works better, the new schedule that I have. And the third way to increase movement is to do movement that's fun. Do things that are fun. Do things that give you energy. I have found some forms of movement now that I really enjoy. I enjoy the gym that I go to. I've also been increasing the walking that I do and yoga. I have been loving yoga, and it is fun for me and enjoyable. So I put that more in my schedule. The third way Rubin talks about increasing energy is something I've really been doing lately, is the idea of toss, restore, and organize. It's really about getting rid of clutter and to notice what clutter you have and what you can let go of. It's really a spring cleaning in January, and I love it. She talks about a lot of different kinds of clutter, which I thought was interesting, and I wrote them down for all of you, for me to share with all of you, because I thought they were interesting. So she talked about the different kinds of clutter, and she talked in the book, and please get the Happiness Project if you're interested in all of this, because I found it fascinating and it's really helpful. So the different types of clutter are, and we'll go over some of them. Nostalgic clutter are all the things that are, that remind you of the past. And we tend to keep a lot of things. Nostalgic clutter we have right now that we've been going through is our daughter's, all of her papers that she's done in the past, all of her artwork that she's done, and determining which are really the ones that we want to keep and which ones are the ones we need to let go of. I would have bins and bins full of paper if I kept all of my daughter's artwork and all of the things she's done. So nostalgic clutter, we're going through that right now. There's also bargain clutter, where there are things that you bought because they were on a bargain, because they were low price. And it's funny. I used to go to the dollar store more, and this is no disrespect to the dollar store because there's a lot of fun things you can get. I'd buy, oh, it's just $1, I can buy this. Oh, it's just $1, I can buy it. And I've realized now that even if it's inexpensive, unless it's 100% what I need, I don't get it, even if it's just $1, because then it becomes that bargain clutter that just sits around and I don't want it anymore. Another type of clutter that I have fallen into terribly is freebie clutter. There's something that your parents are giving away that they don't need anymore. Well, I'll take it, I'll use it, or I'll think I'll use it, or okay, I could take that. I'm at the point now where if it's a freebie, unless it's something I really want, I'm really focused on saying no to it, because once I get that freebie and if it's really not something I'm going to use, then I either have to give it away, I have to store it, or I have to throw it away, which I really hate doing. I've been really rethinking the idea of taking things or accepting things just because they're free, because it doesn't serve me. Another area of clutter that she talks about is aspirational clutter. The things that you think you're going to use. Well, that is me and then some. I have a lot of aspirational clutter that is in the form of magazines. I think I'm going to go over the magazines, or I'm going to use them for an art project, something like a vision board, which I love to do. But I got to say, I have a lot of magazines that are bugging me, that are in the garage, that I am going to toss because I'm not going to use all of them, and they're feeling I'm feeling overwhelmed with the amount of them. Aspirational clutter for me is often around art projects that I think I'm going to do at a certain point in time. Now I'm at a point where there's so much of it that I need to get rid of some of the things because I just have too many. Buyer's remorse clutter is one of the last areas of clutter I'm going to talk about. And those are the things that you buy that you realize later on you shouldn't have bought. And I still have a few of those things. I've talked before about getting rid of clothes that you don't like or don't fit. And I found that there are some more of them and I have to go through them. I want to go through with them. It's just hard to do that and to admit that I made a mistake and to let those things go. That to me is a lot of what this whole category is about, is to let go of things that you really don't need, and that there is such a value in having less, or at least having the things that you really need and cherish and want and bring you joy and happiness. I love Marie Kondo, who talks about clutter and getting rid of things in The Magic of Tidying Up. She says, you take each item and you say, does this spark joy? And if it sparks joy, keep it. And if it doesn't, let it go. That is a great takeaway for me. The third area that Gretchen Rubin talks about in order to experience more energy is to tackle a nagging project. What's that project that you haven't done that's unfinished that you need to and want to get done? For me right now, that is the taxes. It is January and it is time to get all the paperwork together for my CPA to do all of our taxes. That is a nagging project, and that is on my to-do list over the next couple of days, is to get all that paperwork together for her in order to let it go and then let her do her work. Lastly, Gretchen talks about acting more energetic. It's that idea of act as if, and to do something before you feel it. So if you're having trouble with having more energy, and I know that happens when we have issues with depression and sadness and grief and loneliness, I get it. But if you engage in something that has a little bit more energy to it, it actually can help you feel better and can help you move through those feelings in order to get a little higher on that happiness scale. And that can be something literally as simple as getting out and taking a walk, getting out and just getting some sunlight on your brain and go breathe that fresh air. It can, having a little bit more energy, engaging a little bit more energy increases the energy. As we talk about every week, we talk about a doable. And I got to say, I gave you a lot of doables. You could take any one of the areas that we discussed today in the Happiness Project, engage in one of them and see if it increases your level of happiness. See what it does to boost your energy and boost that good feeling. The month of January can be a tough month because it can be cold and dark and rainy or snowy, and we can end up being inside. And all of these areas that I just talked about, you can engage in inside and then actually boost the energy and happiness that you feel in your life. I love this idea of increasing happiness, and I am full on in. I have been doing movement, as I call it, and putting more movement into my schedule, and that's been feeling really good. I have been tossing things like you wouldn't believe and reorganizing in a way that fits for me and my family. My project I've been doing is working on getting those taxes done, and all these things help me feel more energetic. I hope this has been helpful to you and that you've learned something about how you're going to maybe have your own happiness project. I'd love to hear what you're doing. Put it in for a review. I'd love to hear how you're going to have your own personal happiness project. This is Kim McLaughlin. I am from feedyoursoulunlimited.com. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I look forward to talking to you more, bringing you fresh new content next week. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. We come to you every Monday with fresh new ideas to help you end emotional eating and put food in its proper place as nourishment. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and review it and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us.